the roar of imaginary engines, the glint of phantom aircraft, all designed to deceive an enemy. During the crucible of the Pacific theater of World War II, Allied forces masterminded an incredible covert operation, the construction of what they called dummy airfields. These were not mere scarecrows. They were elaborate, fake military bases, meticulously crafted from simple materials like plywood, canvas, and palm fronds. This ingenious stratagem, often overlooked in the grand narrative of the war, became a silent hero. It brilliantly diverted critical Japanese intelligence and resources, showcasing an unsung chapter of tactical brilliance that profoundly impacted the outcome of the Pacific Campaign. We're unearthing this audacious deception, discovering how low-tech illusion became a high-impact weapon, masking real operational sites, and fundamentally shifting the balance of power in the skies. In the opening stages of the Pacific War, the situation for the Allied forces was nothing short of desperate. Following the swift, devastating expansion of the Empire of Japan, the vast oceanic battleground was initially dominated by the sheer scale of Japanese air and naval power. From late 1941 through 1942, the Japanese military operated with alarming efficiency, establishing a powerful ring of island bases across the South Pacific. A critical component of this early dominance was their highly effective and relentless intelligence gathering. Japanese reconnaissance aircraft, often flying unmolested, were the eyes of their military machine. They meticulously charted Allied movements, located supply depots, and, most crucially, pinpointed every operational airfield. These airfields were the lifeblood of Allied air power, the bases from which crucial interceptors and bombers launched. For the Japanese, destroying these bases on the ground was a far more efficient and less costly strategy than engaging in dogfights in the air. This reality established a strategic vulnerability for the Allied forces that demanded an immediate and innovative counter. Every operational base was a target, and every piece of accurate intelligence gathered by the enemy threatened to erase vital assets and personnel. The constant threat of enemy air raids targeting known airfields meant that protecting real assets became the single most critical, yet seemingly impossible, defensive task. The Allies needed to find a way to make their actual bases invisible, or better yet, to confuse the enemy into striking at ghosts. The urgency was palpable. In theaters like the Solomons and New Guinea, the difference between victory and defeat often hinged on which side could sustain air operations. With limited resources and the constant pressure of enemy attacks, simply building more real airfields was not a sustainable option. A new, radical form of counterintelligence was required, a strategy that didn't rely on superior firepower or vast resources, but on pure deception and the exploitation of the enemy's own assumptions. This desperate need for counterintelligence gave birth to the audacious idea of the dummy airfield. It was a solution born of necessity, leveraging low-tech creativity to fight a high-stakes war, aiming to turn the Japanese military's intelligence dominance into its greatest weakness. The concept was simple in its genius, yet complex in its execution. To construct entirely fake operational airfields, convincing enough to fool high-flying Japanese reconnaissance. These were the dummy airfields, and their introduction marked a paradigm shift in Allied tactical thinking. But what exactly were these dummy airfields, and who came up with this audacious idea? While camouflage and battlefield deception have existed for centuries, the scale and detail applied in the Pacific were revolutionary. It was a strategy largely born from the collaborative needs of forward-deployed Allied engineers and airmen who understood the precise operational signs an enemy pilot or intelligence officer would look for. They understood that a fake base needed more than just a runway. It needed the activity and the signatures of a real one. The deception went far beyond merely clearing a strip of land. Beyond plywood and canvas, the intricate details were astonishing. These sites were often built adjacent to or in strategically distracting locations near real airfields. Every aspect was simulated. Fake runways were graded and covered with dust to mimic real traffic. Dummy aircraft, often life-sized replicas of Allied fighters and bombers like the P-40 Warhawk or the B-17 Flying Fortress, were painstakingly crafted. These were not hastily assembled props. They were built with incredible attention to detail, painted with accurate insignia, and weathered to appear operational. They were often constructed on movable skids so they could be shifted daily to simulate the movement of real aircraft being towed in and out of revetments. Further enhancing the illusion were the dummy support structures. Fake hangars and fuel depots were constructed using local materials and camouflage netting. Roads leading to the dummy base were deliberately driven upon to create realistic vehicle tracks. Even dummy anti-aircraft gun positions, often made from cleverly arranged logs and barrels, were included to suggest a defended, high-value target. Sometimes, smoke generators would be employed to simulate the dust and engine exhaust of a busy air operation. The true genius of the dummy airfield lay in its perfect imperfection. Allied planners knew that a perfectly neat, spotless base would look suspicious. Instead, they incorporated simulated signs of wear and tear, fake bomb craters, patched-up runways, and scattered equipment to make the site appear like a recently used, high-priority target that had already weathered minor attacks. Rare archival footage and surviving historical photographs showcasing the construction and appearance of these dummy sites reveal the extraordinary commitment of the engineers and labor corps. Their work was an unsung form of industrial art, transforming simple materials into convincing tactical illusions. It was this level of detail that made the difference, ensuring that when the Japanese pilots flew overhead, they saw not a collection of props, but a high-value, tempting target deserving of their limited ordnance. The dummy airfields were fundamentally an exercise in psychological warfare, a brilliant low-cost strategy designed to manipulate the enemy's critical resource allocation and intelligence priorities. The goal was not simply to hide. It was to actively entice the enemy to waste their most valuable assets, their reconnaissance time, their precious aviation fuel, and their limited supply of bombs on attacking nothing of value. The Japanese intelligence system, though dominant early in the war, was prone to believing what it expected to see. The presence of a seemingly operational Allied base, complete with aircraft, fuel dumps, and defensive positions, was an irresistible target. By presenting these phantom bases, Allied strategists brilliantly forced the Japanese command to make a critical and ultimately costly choice: either allocate resources to destroy the dummy base or risk letting a significant operational threat remain. In the fog of war, the risk calculation almost always favored striking the perceived threat. Specific instances of this deception successfully drawing Japanese attention are numerous, though often relegated to anecdotal accounts from unit histories. One of the most famous examples occurred during the campaign for the Russell Islands, a critical staging area near Guadalcanal. When the Japanese detected the rapid buildup of Allied forces, they began frequent reconnaissance over the area. Allied forces, in preparation for the upcoming offensive, constructed elaborate dummy bases, complete with over a dozen replica aircraft in locations that were easily observable but tactically useless. When Japanese strike aircraft arrived, they followed their intelligence, expending their full bomb loads on the fake strips and the wooden planes. The real, crucial Allied airfields, just a short distance away, went untouched. These strikes, documented by Allied observers, were a staggering testament to the deception's effectiveness. Each bomb dropped on plywood was a bomb not dropped on a real runway, hangar, or fuel depot. The unseen impact of this misdirection was profound and directly contributed to key Allied victories. By diverting strike aircraft and tying up reconnaissance assets, the dummy airfield saved countless Allied lives and conserved desperately needed resources. They bought time for real bases to be completed, for vital supplies to be unloaded, and for real operational aircraft to prepare for their missions. The cumulative effect of these repeated tactical victories, the continuous wasting of Japanese ordnance, and the resulting exhaustion of their air crews was a slow but steady degradation of the enemy's operational capability. This psychological manipulation was a masterstroke. It sowed seeds of doubt into the enemy's intelligence chain, forcing them to double-check every sighting and eroding their confidence in their own reconnaissance. The fear of striking a dummy target and thus wasting irreplaceable resources forced a delay in Japanese decision-making, giving the Allies a priceless operational advantage. The dummy airfield, therefore, was not merely a physical decoy. It was a powerful tool that attacked the very mind of the enemy commander. The construction of the dummy airfields was a massive logistical undertaking requiring an unusual blend of military discipline, engineering ingenuity, and artistic talent. The unsung heroes of this entire operation were not the aces in the cockpits, but the engineers, the carpenters, the labor battalions, and in many cases, actual artists and set designers recruited for their ability to create convincing, three-dimensional illusions. The engineers were the backbone, devising quick, modular construction methods for the replica aircraft and structures, often using nothing more than readily available local materials. The artists and camouflage experts were tasked with the meticulous detailing, the painting of the dummy planes to mimic light and shadow, the weathering of the surfaces, and the overall arrangement of the base to look functional and active from an altitude of thousands of feet. This required a keen understanding of aerial perspective and photography. The strategists, on the other hand, worked closely with intelligence officers to determine the most effective placement, locations that were visible but strategically irrelevant, and often along the flight paths the Japanese were known to use. Geographically, the dummy airfields were a crucial component of the island-hopping campaign across the Pacific. While the tactic was employed across nearly every theater, certain locations stand out where the deception was absolutely crucial. Guadalcanal and the surrounding Solomon Islands, the site of the first major Allied land offensive, was one such place. The defense of Henderson Field, the real, vital Allied airstrip, was paramount. Dummy strips in the area helped draw Japanese attacks away, safeguarding the actual air operations that ultimately made the Guadalcanal victory possible. Similarly, the islands and dense jungles of New Guinea were prime staging grounds for these illusions. As Allied forces pushed westward, establishing forward operating bases, dummy airfields were constantly being built and dismantled. They served as vital shields for the real bases supplying the offensive push toward the Japanese stronghold of Rabaul. The operational tempo was so high that as soon as one deception had been exploited, another was put into place. The scale of the operation was enormous. While exact figures are impossible to confirm due to the nature of the covert operation and the inevitable destruction of the fakes, hundreds of dummy aircraft and dozens of complete dummy airfields were constructed throughout the Pacific theater from late 1942 through 1944. Their collective strategic significance cannot be overstated. They were not merely localized tactical diversions. They were an integral part of the overarching Allied strategy to achieve air superiority. Every time Japanese commanders committed resources to a ghost target, it slowed their response time, increased their losses, and accelerated the exhaustion of their war machine. The cumulative effect of these silent wooden warriors was a continuous, subtle bleed on the Japanese war effort, allowing real Allied power to build and eventually overwhelm the enemy. The story of the dummy airfields is a powerful example of how ingenuity and low-tech creativity can triumph over superior material resources. This incredible deception, a collective effort of engineers, strategists, and artists, laid a critical groundwork for the future of military camouflage and misdirection tactics. The principles refined in the Pacific, understanding the enemy's observation patterns, simulating realistic operational signatures, and leveraging psychological expectations, became standard operating procedure in later conflicts and were integral to the planning of the massive deceptions leading up to the Normandy landings in Europe. The construction of dummy ports, army convoys, and even entire phantom armies, such as those used by the famous Ghost Army, all owe a tactical debt to the pioneers who first perfected the large-scale simulation of military assets in the South Pacific. The idea that a fake installation could be just as strategically valuable as a real one, simply by virtue of drawing enemy fire, permanently altered the doctrine of military deception. Yet, despite its profound impact, this incredible story remains largely unknown and unsung in popular history. There are several reasons for this deliberate historical silence. Firstly, the nature of intelligence and deception operations means they are often classified and downplayed by the militaries that employ them, preventing the full story from emerging until decades later. Secondly, historical narratives often favor the heroism of direct combat. The dogfights, the charges, the major bombardments. A victory won by plywood and canvas lacks the immediate dramatic appeal of a pitched battle, making it a difficult story to center in a war film or history book. The very success of the deception meant the Japanese rarely realized they were hitting a fake, meaning there were fewer spectacular, verifiable accounts of their failure to capture public imagination. The victory was silent, subtle, and cumulative. However, the legacy of lies is a powerful one. It teaches us that war is not only a contest of firepower, but also one of wits, imagination, and morale. The construction of the dummy airfields in the Pacific was an act of profound strategic intelligence, a testament to the fact that when faced with overwhelming odds, human creativity can be the ultimate force multiplier. The heroes behind this deception, the men who built the planes that never flew, and the airfields that never launched a single sortie, deserve recognition for their crucial role in turning the tide of the Pacific War. Their story is a powerful call to action, to explore the deeper, often overlooked currents of military history, encouraging us all to acknowledge the unsung heroes and the ingenious tactics from WWII Tower that prove the greatest weapon on any battlefield is often the human mind itself. The ghosts of the Pacific, the phantom runways, and the dummy fighters remain a monument to the power of illusion and a profound lesson in the art of war.